Doing good. Yeah, it scares me when you send an email at 5:54.
Well, we went to Colin this afternoon to the dental appointment. So I was thinking about, Phil suggested something around strategic planning for a question, and I thought about it. And sat down with it, and I thought, and then they came to me, and so I'm not sure what y'all think, but check out your email. There you go.
We'll get to it. You ready, Joe?
I am.
You ready? All right, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. The board wants to provide ample opportunity for public comment on matters that come before us. Your input is important. If you wish to address an item already on the agenda, we ask that you do so when that item comes up for discussion. If you have a comment on a matter not on the agenda, this is the time during our meetings for such comments. The board would like to remind everyone in attendance that to avoid violations of individual rights and privacy, a member of the public wishing to address the board during this time will not be allowed to make comments about any student, staff member, or member of the general public during this time. Does anyone wish to speak at this time? Okay, I'm going to discuss a couple changes to the agenda tonight. I guess the first thing, the policy reviews that we have listed, we're going to look at tabling those until Eric is back and Kevin, and just, I think it'd be better for everybody to be in person. So when we get to that, I think we'll just look at moving all of those down the road. Next on the items of discussion, I'm going to move the elementary building project in front of the initial reopening plan just to allow Shane to say his piece, and then he can move down the road as well. So unless Eric has something else that I need to start with, I'll turn it over to Shane. He shook his head no. That's all yours, Shane.
Okay. I'll just quickly touch on the boiler replacement. Everything is running really well so far, and before we replace the second one, obviously we want to make sure that one's just singing along, and it is. Actually, I know that Jim's actually been backfeeding the elementary school with some of the heat we're able to produce out of that one single boiler, so it's really run really smooth. We were talking about maybe trying to do the second switch over Christmas, but I think we've come to the conclusion we want to wait just a little longer. Maybe do it in January sometime. We'll shut down the other boiler and just let that one. So if there's any questions on that, everything seems to be going really well for us. Did have the meeting with the city council to present the alternate closure of second to the one-way and the additional parking. And my perception, the mayor was missing and one other council member was missing, but my perception was everybody, I didn't see any adverse reactions to it.
No, they're not.
So with that, I know that we're trying to figure out, through the attorneys, what's the best way to go about that, whether how we do a memorandum of understanding or making sure the utility easements, they still own it, but we obviously would be doing the maintenance on the sidewalk and stuff like that. So we're just trying to figure out how to go about that. But outside of that, I think it was pretty receptive. And the way that we're going to do this, so I turned the design team loose on doing that alternate design. And did that as an alternate, and then you as a board can make the decision whether to spend the additional funds, because it's going to be more expensive than what the original ones anyways. We are going to have some additional funds, though, that we can discuss it at that point, and you guys can make a good decision. So,
Yeah, can you remind me right quick what kind of configuration? Can you remind me right quick around what that configuration is going to look like with the streets?
Yeah, so it actually pulls this in. We're taking almost the first two lanes. In fact, I think it is the first two lanes. And we're going to turn that into parking, and then there'll be a pull-by lane and a pull-in lane for a drop-off, and it's a one-way out to go onto the the street right over here.
Pine.
No, this one.
Pine.
Okay.
Pine Street.
So this one, so Pine's over here and
Yeah, Pine.
Seven's over here.
Yeah, Pine. So it'll go straight out to Pine.
So that parking lot that's there is basically going to grow into the street and take up part of the street.
Okay.
But traffic will still go like it is now.
Like a one-laner or something with the.
So basically the drop-off lane that's there now, that'll stay, the rest of it turns into parking lot.
Okay.
The street.
But there's enough room to get by, you're not longer headed
Yeah,
right
there's two
behind.
lanes. To pull over and then to pass through and that grows the, okay. Now is that that's gonna become a one-way? I'm always backwards going
Yeah, right,
this way,
like this.
a one-way this way. How does that work? Because we talked about this, the hospital's one way goes the other direction.
Yeah, and we were discussing that a little bit, but I don't think this is gonna affect, to be honest, because we're coming in and just turning in, and the only way for us to get out is on line. I don't think we're interfering with them. They'll have to change their route. If, they're not gonna be able to use this route this way. They'll have to go one side or the other. To get over there one way, but I don't think they're gonna have a problem. It's not gonna be as bad as we're having to make them change. If we go with our original,
Yeah.
we're gonna have to work with them to change the one way, because our one way was opposite of their one, if I'm not mistaken.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
it was, yeah.
Does it, and whatever, it's just perfect, but does it make sense to put our one way the other direction so that emergency vehicles can travel directly to the hospital?
It doesn't, because of our parking lot with the high school students, we're trying to separate that where we're not having traffic crossing where kids are crossing the street.
Okay.
And your kids would be dropped off on the wrong side, then they'd be
Yeah.
crossing the park.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's a
Okay.
really good point there.
That's, okay, that makes sense, yeah. Okay, thank you.
You bet. The next thing, there was a couple of items that have come up as we've been designing. One of the things I termed the design theme was your high school PA system is worse shape than I thought it was at the beginning, so I never had anything to replace your high school PA system. But in looking at that, it was pretty much a 300 life expectancy on that system, or if you're struggling to find the parts for it. So what I asked them to do is to design the same PA system we're putting in the elementary school, they'll just expand it to that, to the high school. And then again, you guys can choose whether you want to do it. I'm going to suggest that you do it, because it's never going to be as less expensive as it is right now for you to do it, but it'll still be a choice whether it's an alternate. Because I did not have that accounted for it. I thought the PA was in good enough shape. The fire alarm, we always knew we were going to have to do, so that is a good design. The next thing I did too is we were looking at the middle school, and we were just going to do a facelift in the classrooms that are existing. We're going to do carpet, paint, more. We did not have lighting replacement in there, but I think we're going to have all new LEDs in our new building. What I asked them to do is to design the middle school rooms that we're going to just be doing facelift to actually fit the lights and all that. We can change the lights up. Obviously, that's going to be an additional cost that we don't have accounted for, but you guys will just, I think it's going to be a good idea to at least have a design fitted and you guys can look at it. I think it'll be a big upgrade. We just never thought about replacing the lights because we were kind of hold back on the budget. So, but at this point, I think we look at it, we can fit it as an alternate to you guys. We've been working a lot on budget. We're close. We're still really struggling. One of the pieces that come up with is on all of our steel stud framing. We're really running short on people that are willing to bid that. We've been reaching out to a couple of entities. I'm not sure we're going to get a lot of bids. So one of the things we, as a team, have discussed is probably maybe putting an RFP out, like we did for the structural steel, because that's worked really well. Our structural steel is locked in. We're actually going to be, hopefully within 3 weeks, be ordering our main members, so we can lock that pricing in. I want to do something similar for the steel stud framing. So I think our team, and I'm just letting you guys know, so I think we're going to take that out as an RFP. It's a legal process. It'll be advertised. At least that way we can maybe lock somebody into that. Because I really hate for us to take that out of bid because it's $1 million+ scope of work. We've got to have some people that are willing to look at it. I think doing the RFP will at least get that.
Does that just expand it or reach it farther? What changes from just taking it to bid to
It
doing that?
changes that they don't have to wait to bid this work until February when I get back to out. They can lock work out right now.
Okay.
Under an RFP. because we'll get their rates for the percentage of the logic piece. We just don't know the scale yet, we won't have 100% done, design. You can only bid it and part of it, and once you have every little stick on it, then, then we would bid it, if you're on a fee, we bring along their experience, they have, they've been in business, they've got the crews to do it, they have the financial health in the company to be able to on something on that side. Get them on early, locking them up, and not having to wait till February, because if they fill up before we bid, we're not going to get somebody. Or we might get one and they're going to shoot for the moon because they know they can. So we haven't 100% made that decision, but I think that's kind of where we were leaning. We all met on Monday, Danny, DAC, and myself, and I think that's one of the ones we're really worried about. We're the same structural steel a while ago, but I know we have a bunch of large projects we're bringing out right now. We're going to be competing with Three Forks. We're going to be competing with Volvo. We're going to be competing with some projects that have up in Great Falls. I just want to try to make sure we're getting these nailed down as best we can. So we're not in a bad position come February. So just want to let you guys know that. So that's where we're at. Budget-wise, we need to cut about, I think we're looking at about $600,000. We need to get cut out of the budget, then we should be 6 to 7. But we're working diligently on that. And we haven't taken any programming or any space yet. If we can't find it, we're probably going to have to make some cuts to some pieces that we wanted. But as soon as we do that, I'll let you know if we have to. So right now, we don't think we have to. We're just starting to cut a little bit of our camera systems last week. That helped tremendously when we were able to, we went from 48 or 60 cameras down to 9. That's the kind of stuff that we need to keep working on. So we'll now take any questions.
Not this time.
Well, very good.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Same.
Now we'll move into our initial reopening plan follow-up. Wilkerson, do you have something to start with?
So, I know that Gary kind of visited with me a little bit about the week after Christmas break again, maybe revisiting doing remote for that week after. So I thought it was worth it. I told her it was worth a discussion, at least at this board meeting. Bring it up, some of the concerns that she has. And maybe some of the other concerns people have, and at least have that discussion. So we're all on the same page, and we're at least talking about it and giving it a look and deciding maybe how to move forward on that. So I'm not sure where you're concerned with that. If it's a feedback from Sherry or me or anybody else, but I guess just want to make sure we have that discussion.
I'll let you start.
Yeah, initially we were just kind of, looking at kind of what the situation's been like for the past couple of days. Especially, we were talking earlier about maybe doing something proactive, and then we decided, we'll just go with our schedules, that's what's disruptive for everybody, and, not necessarily one way or another may, but then here we are, we have pretty rough week last week. It seems to cycle between the elementary, middle school, and the high school. Done a lot of good homes last week. Found out today, though, they get to come back a little sooner, get the new adoption of the CDC guidelines for 10 days, goes to 14. So I made a bunch of calls today with most of the going to back a few days early, which was great. So yeah, I also had a really good talk with the high school staff. They had a staff meeting this morning, and so I hadn't had an opportunity to even talk to Eric about this or update them with what they kind of their feedback was. A lot of it started from just feeling frustrations from our staff, all of them. Mainly, at some point during this when we're dealing with everything, they're coming and working to teach their in-person kids here at the school, right? To make keeping everything, they're plugging and working and building their shelter, and the person they have, and what they're doing now. And then when we have these different quarantine things going on, where we have 26 kids home, or 11 or 15, or whatever the numbers are, part of classes, then they're dealing with all of getting the work prepared and together with all those quarantine kids and getting that all disseminated too, because oftentimes it's not just putting stuff on the apartment, that's part of it, but there might be hard having something else to do, or rain how they're going to be kept, or it just depends.
And they're meeting with them as well, which they're doing.
Right, so they're Google meeting, and they're setting aside time, and they're finding that their 1 15-minute prep is just not giving them the time they need, and to be able to still continue to do the production in their classroom with their in-person stuff. They're just getting stretched thin. They're kind of the overall picture of it, which understandably so, everybody's getting stretched thin. After talking with the high school staff today, though, I mean, initially one of the things we were looking at a couple of different things and some different suggestions. Maybe again, revisiting. Well, if we look at, we've got the Christmas break, we know Christmas break is going to be another opportunity to have what we have happened before. Their feedback today was that they feel like that's just probably not going to be, the pros are not going to outweigh the cons. Meaning when the kids leave the building, they're finding the quarantine kids is really difficult for them to even answer them. The kids aren't answering. They tune out, they're on a 2-day vacation or whatever. Even though we tell them they're not, they're still doing some of that. So they'd rather have them on schedule in the week. So that was good feedback to her today, but they feel like that absolutely would be at this point more appropriate. That wasn't the initial thought when we did the survey, but now I think they think it would be better to kind of run course. The biggest issues are, or challenges, I think that we need to look at and consider that several times to how sustainable is it, where it can be something. And it's getting to be really hard for them to manage all of that stuff. So maybe there were a few ideas, maybe the thing that we, Jason and I have talked about, Eric and I, and Brad, not just picked on several things. I know some schools are taking 1 day a week where they're doing an earlier week. So, for example, Wednesday, and we're looking like at 1:30. That would give 2 hours a week for teachers to be able to get their stuff done for the week, touch base with those systems that were quarantine kids. This is on a new class, so prep for their regular in-person teaching, all of those things. Giving us that little extra time where they don't have actual students that they're fielding at the same time in that way. Maybe have to do their remote learning meetings with their students or whatever it is. I was thinking, we kind of got along like a 1:30.
We have a 1:30 release schedule now, and that would cost us 2 every one, so that's 1
Right, so that was one thought. A few high schools have mentioned that they're using crisis hours, and so I'm not sure, have you heard about Eric, crisis hours through OPI? So that might be something we want to look at. Maybe we can figure out what that is or investigate that, but that's what they're using and getting some of those hours. And as long as they're meeting and doing things with kids, you know what I mean, working with kids, that might be something. So those are things we would have to work out on our hours, the time with the kids, the hours that we spend.
So is that kind of like overtime? I mean, is that what this ends up in, so to speak? I mean, as an end result, crisis time. So what is it?
No.
In your mind, what is it?
No, but that's something.
Right.
Yeah,
It
somehow
doesn't
through
count.
OPI, there might be hours available that don't count against our in-person hours. That's why I'm asking, I'm not familiar with it, so I'm going to be able to put it back. So, that's just one thought. Another suggestion that one of the high school teachers said today was, is there a way, no offense to Joe whatsoever, he's trying to do his regular job, which is also stressed like everybody else's, but is there a way to actually hire a permanent sub or a long-time sub to handle that appellate suit and field most of the contacts and field most of the questions and talk to the appellate suit, kind of go that both of us, and we're, just family trying to walk through all those questions and how it won't work. That was another thought. Would we actually take a person that would be that, say, for instance, one of our subs, I'm just throwing that out as an example. We could actually take over the running and manning of the adult program itself. That would be one piece that we could really pick up everybody's plate from the day to day. you know, with the teachers still need to have something to do with that. Of course, they're still our students, but maybe we can mitigate some of that responsibility and help us out.
Because we got that's the plan versus supplementary.
Right.
But if we were to turn it over to a sub, I don't know, where would that?
My question is, what would that individual do, I guess, is because what I found, like with Joe, and Joe did a great job getting this rolling, but once that initial wave of all these students were out there, you know, the fellas was distributed, we got them. Now when there's a new one in, you know, we can set them up with ourselves, get them enrolled in classes, do that. And what we found is like Joe, not just Joe, but any individual that's not a teacher in that field is, you know, like, I don't know that Joe would sit down and answer questions about Spanish class
I
or,
wouldn't feel comfortable.
You know,
well, I think you could do it, Joe. But
No, that is a good point.
that's what I mean, if we ran into that, like, okay, we're gonna have somebody that runs this, but then all these things where how are you grading in there? How's the teacher getting that, you know, coming to that grade where I need help with, you know, this thing, and I don't know how one person can do
To
that.
do all that, yeah. And that's a good point, John, and it is a wide, I know that the time that I've spent talking to the people at Excel, it's so widely flexible, and it depends on each, it's literally, it can't be an independent learning student for every single kid. So, I mean, so much can be flexible and change and move, and you adapt it to whatever that particular student. And you're right, a lot of that's on the teacher, and then you have to know where they are. So, yeah, definitely, that could be a hit in the dead zone for sure. I'm just throwing out the suggestions that we're going out there, and ideas to me. So, but mainly I think a lot of it just revolves on just needing another little piece of time. I don't know, we even have to look at the schedule, and I know a lot of the stuff has to go into it, but like, for example, in the high school, looking at the teacher's class schedule for the second semester and saying, okay, here's all of our breakouts for a syllabus. Are there classes where we have just a few kids and a couple of kids, and we just put them in other classes, and then a teacher has extra prep? I don't know how that works with all of the legalities and everything. Maybe just trying to free up some time. And then really possible.
I wonder, and maybe this is where the crisis time comes into play, and I don't know. But is it, you know, those remote learners and the Acellus learners, they should receive, well, they should ideally receive instruction or assistance, let's say assistance daily or every other day. Once a week, they're lost in these, okay, and I think it's far too little. But does it make, just from an educational perspective, does it make sense to shorten up, if we can, the length of each period during the day and provide an hour or an hour and 15 minutes at the beginning of the day for specifically time for faculty to work with the Acellus and remote learners? That way, that would start those students off positively for the day. They could accomplish something for the day. It's not like waiting for the end of the day for some assistance. But can we adjust the schedule in some way to make that work?
Well, if we're adjusting schedules, should we revisit the 4-day school week? And they could have a whole morning or something.
Or an hour in that 4 days.
I don't know if, you know, and to me, it seems like making such a huge transition to a 4-day week changes hours significantly. And I think it just seems to me like a small modification would be the easiest thing to consider, not a major modification, because that does have a lot of implications around, the 4-day week has a lot of implications around, you know, working parents, daycare, a lot of different issues like that.
I know it's some of the high school classes and that, certainly their classes even more, maybe not. You know, just to get to the regular system and what they do. And, you know, I'm not hearing that they're feeling like I think what I'm hearing from them in general is that really, even if it was just once a week, where they would have a chunk of time that they could dedicate, and not even just to the homework, just to whatever needs to be done. You know, say they're working and doing their, you know, just doing their prep on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the day before Thursday, and then they should do that one chunk of time to get the rest of their prep to the week for what they make for their classes. Because they're missing it, because they're spending their prep hours having to do and study all these other things. So that's kind of what I'm hearing. They're not necessarily asking for time daily. They just, they think it might be helpful to have some chunk of time somewhere during the day.
And this is just, what they're thinking is just simply prep time, it's not actually.
Well,
prep time
no,
for
either
themselves.
prep time or, because what they're doing right now is,
Using the
they're
prep
using
time
their prep
to-
time to help deal with a lot of.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
So when they go to teach their in-person stuff, they're just scrambling, trying to get their stuff ready for their.
So they use it to be essentially a prep time, because they're using a prep time, a prep block, let's say, rather than prep time, okay, to make the distinction between the two. Then they would have their prep time, again, to make the distinction between the two. Daily, to be able to work with those remote, those Allison, those remote learners, because you don't want them, my own experience, if you touch them once a week, then you think they're good.
So I guess first question, are you hearing similar from K-8 teachers? Is what
You know, K-8 is a little bit of a different animal, and it's different even within itself, from the lower elementary all the way to the upper and into the middle school. And I guess the one theme I'm hearing is that they're extremely busy and don't have, you know, I would say I'm not necessarily hearing the same thing as far as the original question of that time after Christmas, but I think we're definitely hearing that they're stretched very thin and they're using all the prep time trying to either meet with students or gather things for students that are here. So, yeah, the need is there, I think, from K-12, but the need for more time is there.
Are we talking like 2 hours a week,
You know,
3 hours a week, or there?
I don't know that we
Happy
ever
meeting.
sat down and said this is the amount of time we need to do this, but I think if there was, you know, take for instance the early out scenario. You know, to me, that would be the one that is most workable. I think we still have a lot of issues with parents. How are you going to get your kid home? Are we going to offer something here in some way? You know, it's not obviously convenient to go pick up a second grader at the bus stop at 1:30 in the afternoon. So that's an issue, and I think with, you know, anything we do is an issue, that much, which doesn't mean you fail on a plan because there's an issue with it. But I think from an inside the school standpoint, at least for us, that's the easiest to do. It'd be easiest to modify schedules, make sure you're still getting in what you need here, and that frees up teachers to have, as Sherry said, that time to, you know, whether we dedicate that time for working with the CELIS teachers and then students, and then they're back, have their preps back a little more with some of the other things, or whether we say that, hey, here's additional prep time for you. And I guess a concern I would have with that, I just want to make sure that it's used the way we intend, and that's really important to me, because some things we've done before have not, they don't always play out over time. You know, a lot of times they do right away, but you know, I think there's got to be some parameters to what that time is used for and how we can use it effectively to give the teachers the relief they need. It's all about, I think, not only giving, you know, I think if we frame that with the public, to me, our teachers need a break and need some relief, I think we're going to go, yeah, we do what our jobs do. But I do think there's a need for it for us to actually address the needs of the students, where it's going to come from. And I think it would help tremendously, because right now we're having a hard time meeting those needs. You know, you got to get this work together for these students. You don't have, gee, I need some time to talk to that student who's not been here in 2 weeks. And I think when we look at it from that perspective of, wow, teachers, you know, when you stop and look at what the teachers are doing for those students that aren't here, I think it really justifies itself.
Oh, yeah, and I've
Yeah.
got a firsthand experience with that for the last couple of
Right, right.
No, I'm just, in looking at it from just kind of, I don't know, it was my first blush with, like, whether a block of time works or if it's spread out, but, whether, right now, Fridays are early out at 2:30, what if that was moved to 1:30? If I get 1 hour on the end of it, if we, were able to get an hour or a couple hours on like Tuesday. I mean, there's something not only just the amount of time, but where that time is allocated. Because if you say, well, we have an early out on Friday and they'll use that time, would an extra hour on Friday help? It probably might not work as well as maybe an hour on or a couple hours on Tuesdays or Mondays.
That's kind of why what I got from the high school explaining was that they felt like Friday would probably be pretty ineffective, but that people were coming out like they were tired, the kids were tired, even quarantine or remote learners, they're on a Friday afternoon, not too tough. And then once we start doing activities, that's gonna be another issue. So that's why they kind of said, no activities on Wednesday, when there's some more week, would be a good time to be able to, text them, so that would be able to work. So that was kind of their thought, is that something midweek would be a really good idea. They were worried about Friday afternoon.
Yeah. Well, let me ask this question, because we're talking about taking extra time away from students anyway, taking them out of the classroom anyway, right? With a Wednesday afternoon or Tuesday afternoon, that's ultimately what happens. What is the difference then in the seat time? And I can see some obvious things myself personally, but what is the difference then between shortening the class period and calling it a whole afternoon off?
I think sometimes, Sean, that the difference, and it may or may not be the difference, but I think is that that significant time block where you have a little more of a dedicated focus of that time instead of if you're shaving a few off here and there. And a lot of times that is effective. The thing I think that it most would do is allow us, we're prisoners of our own schedule in this district because of the time we have available for lunch. We have to serve lunch, and then what we've found through the years is when we start cutting those blocks down, then we end up with some really odd chunks of time, and we can't make it fit all nice and neat like we'd like to. Not to say it can't be done. It's good, but it's hard to do that with, and then still gain some meaningful time everywhere else because we have that set block for lunch, which this year is even more time constrained than ever before because of the groupings we have to do. So I think that presents some more challenges that, I guess additional challenges that would have to be overcome, if that makes sense.
So it's more of a scheduling issue rather than an actual seat time issue.
I think so. I mean, I think they're both issues, but I think, to me, at least in my role, that's where it weighs more heavily.
Well, a lot of it, different classes are going to have different views that way. So, like, for example, something that happened in my head is like, for example, AFTV here on campus. By the time you get stressed out, get your day worked out, and I'm trying to tell you that some of 3 point more time off of those classes, that's going to make that. It's already tough for them to meet the deadline anyway. So. And that's just that they do lab classes.
Yeah, you do shower. Well, and that, I mean,
Yeah. Oh, the day you go.
but that's and speaking to Vanessa's point on 4 day weeks, that's a great point. That's a great point that you make for promoting block scheduling. That's too big of a schedule change that I think over the course of one semester to the next. But that's you make a great point as an advocate for block scheduling.
I think more, having a bigger piece of time in the morning would be overall more productive than the next day, in mind. I think as a former teacher, I feel the same way, too, that having an actual
okay, I have just 2 hours to get this, and done, instead of I have 15 minutes there and, 20 minutes there, and I think that would be better, in my mind, the way I work, that would be better.
Well, and I get that, and I agree with that, being a teacher myself, and 15 minutes is not enough.
And you just shut up.
No.
Yeah, there's a 5 or 10 minute startup time and a 5 or 10 minute drop. By 30 minutes, 35 minutes in, everyone's zoning out anyway, unless you're grabbing by the collar. So, I get it. I get what you're saying. So will it be effective? Will an afternoon be effective? Will it be enough hours? Will it be enough time? Will people actually stay? Will it be effective?
I think it's going in the right direction, I think, it's being more like proactive, and as far as whatever that is, if it's 2 hours, hour and a half, whatever that may be, at least it's something that's giving them enough time to work. Like you said, and then, cut times, I know they're using a cut time right now, top skill. With all the remote kids and quarantine kids, and now it's got the 2.5 hours when my bees just get ready for the whole next week. We can't have volunteers, we don't have volunteers in the school. Our parents in school to help with that kind of stuff, they can't, they're interested all the time.
Right.
So now, and if we did, we could have the after school program for kids who can't go home in 1 day or whatever that time might be. And parents might be people that are helping do it, and adults for those kids who can fit. So 1 day is easier to cover than a bunch of them in a row, I guess.
Does a Tuesday make more sense than a Wednesday? That way you can text and prep for those kids earlier in the week?
I think Wednesday, because there's no activities. That's what I think it's the same way. You don't have to worry about activities, or Tuesday you can have activities.
In the schedule.
We might have games in the afternoon, we have games.
In the afternoon,
Really close to
yeah.
stuff, so yeah, Wednesday really just kind of feels like that uncomfortable thing. You know what I mean, it's the day where nothing would be interrupted. And then, like I said, the high school felt kind of like a midweek tough thought of that, and I think, when you look at all the information coming out, and, we're talking academically, we're talking job, like, we have to remember too that, we have several staff affected by COVID, having it themselves, their jobs, right? People that are still, they're trying to build staff and are still, their families affected, whether they're in high school, they can talk about it off, and it's got to go right, so they're getting staff and everything, there's a lot of external stressors as well, that plays into their lives, their overall health and well-being for everybody, So. And the kids are tired. The kids will tell you, they don't want to say, they're tired too. They are. It's really,
And again, I would just go back to the, we all get tired.
yeah, I mean,
The
stress,
greatest
yeah,
thing
maybe tired,
And we all get stressed.
yeah.
The greatest inefficiency is that 2 or 3, 2 weeks, 10 days, 2 weeks out of school, and that you're on and off again, on and off again, and you lose so much learning, and then when you get back in the classroom. And then in my own students experience the same thing. When you get back in the classroom, it's just crazy times like that, because you're not just picking up the 1 or 2 classes. Another longer-term solution is making learning more transparent, where it doesn't matter whether it's digital or face-to-face. But that's a long-term solution, and something we probably need to work towards. That's not today.
Do we get into an aggregate hours problem, Eric, if we cut it 1 day short?
Yeah, definitely, unless we have the what was it called, crisis hours, if OPI will give those hours to us to use, for preps. If we don't have students, if they won't let us do that, of course, yes, we have a huge problem with aggregate hours.
Doesn't that 1900 series, policy series though, or does it 1910? Doesn't that deal with as long as we call, and I'm really just reaching here on this, you guys. If we consider it an emergency, so to speak, or some kind of situation that we don't have to deal with or worry about aggregate hours to receive the right amount of A&D. There's something around those 1900 policies.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's something in there as long as we're serving the students during that time. We can't have an early out and just go home.
Right.
If we're here actually serving those students, I think we'd have a pretty good argument on that.
But I don't think the students have to have the seat time, that bypasses the seat time.
Yeah, and I don't know, I guess the only other idea or thought I had, but I know we're so short on subs, I don't even know if it worked. You know, Kevin brought up a full-time sub. Do we have somebody that's what they do, is they cover for teachers, so they have those prep times, they cover their classes. We come up with a schedule, and that person just basically a floater where they need to be to cover those classes while those teachers can do all their other stuff. Again, we're short on subs. Maybe we need to be creative on how we do that, but
How
yeah,
long
we
would it
keep time, but give them their time.
How
Just a
long would
thought.
it take to get them built up to speed on that, you think, Eric?
How long for us to get that going?
Well, for the sub to be, you know, dare I say, effective, I mean, you wouldn't be
It'd have to
able
be a
to
good
say, I
sub,
need you to
somebody-
prepare these lessons. It's not straight delegation. It's not somebody just stepping in, so. I guess, you know, if that's something that we were to look at, I certainly think the idea's got some merit. We were to get something like that put in place, I mean, would it take 2 or 3 weeks or a month or?
Well, I actually think we could do it fairly quick. If we can find the right person and we don't run short on subs, and just come up with the schedule and say that this is flat out your schedule. You go from this class to this class to this class, and that's when they have the time to do that. But does that work? I don't know. Again, just an idea.
Well, but logistically, how many subs would be required though, because of the number of teachers, the number of classes, like, to get through, yeah. Yeah, how many do we need? I mean, 3, 4, 2? Because it's not
That's
just
something
one.
we have to sit down and look at. Yeah.
And I just really want to reiterate that this is not coming, this is not coming from a place of people complaining or whining, or it truly isn't. It's just coming from a place of just being pushed back to the wall. Because they are working hard and they are doing their due diligence. So it's coming from a place of starting to worry that everything else extra is starting to take a toll on the in-person students and their stuff, and they don't want to diminish the quality of the education of the fifth year too. So I think that's, I just want to reiterate that.
So where's our line? When do we say we just need to go remote? 100%.
You know, we said at the beginning, we would make that, that we don't have a line as such, but I think there's, and we've made that decision with a few grade levels this year, and we've only had to do it a couple of times, fortunately, but I don't know that I think the schools, and when you talk to the schools that have done it, people I know that have been in schools where they've decided to shut down the entire school, they've all come back and said nothing happened. It was the same as it was in the spring. No matter what plans you have, no matter what, there is an equity issue with it. I mean, there just is with the education of remote learning. And by that, I mean the access kids have to it and the support at home. Schools kind of a great equalizer with that. So I think we kind of thought we're going to do everything we can to not go that route. But you're right, at some point, the resources are just too thin. And for us, I think that's kind of the discussion that led to this. So at what point do the resources get so thin that we can't cover classes? We have students getting nothing out of being here because we don't have anybody in that class. Unfortunately, we're in a good spot now with some of the college kids won't being able to take some classes and positions. That'll go away in January, and that concerns me. The lack of subs, I think, is what will drive that, not necessarily the volume of students going.
It seems like we stayed, I know we bumped up a little bit. Now I didn't see, I saw this week's COVID numbers, all these numbers. In the high school, we were up a little bit. I think there was 19 students that were quarantined out of 220. I think in the high school, got 9. I think that's correct.
I think so. They've come and gone over the last couple of days.
So 19, that's about 8 or 9%. Okay, 8 or 9%. I didn't see the middle school nor the elementary school numbers. The bump that we thought we might see after Thanksgiving really, I mean, it may have bumped a little, but if you look at the numbers from last week, it didn't bump a lot.
We had a lot in the last week. Last week was the last week.
Well, so what were the numbers last week? Tell me the numbers.
I think we had 26 kids out last week.
Okay, high school kids?
Yeah.
Okay, well,
And four teachers, that's the kicker right there.
Yeah.
The staff only.
Yeah, I think it mentioned 3. I think it mentioned 3 teachers last week.
We have 4 on the, 21 students in the high school, 6 in the middle school, 19 in
Yeah, so relatively speaking, and I know it's a handful, I've been there and done that, but relatively low numbers of students that are out.
And that's very true, for all of this we're talking about,
Yeah.
and just releasing that, still, at the end of the day, we're actually not done, because we know that.
I think it's proven and demonstrated the safest place for kids is here.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
No control we have is here.
one caveat with those numbers is that those numbers are very fluid, that they, it could be a complete, different 20 kids. That it's just like, and I think that's some of the frustration I hear from teachers. This is so hard from day to day to keep track of this kid's back, now this one's gone. And it's just kind of a revolving, and yeah, at any given time, it's only X number of students, but when you look, did I look at those numbers too? I said, really, it's not that many, but man, it's just like a revolving door of who's there. And the thing that happened too is I found out this week that, it's okay, they're just out a day or two because if you're sick and you get tested, well, that's a minimum of 2 days you're out. And so those kids are just, and the same I think with teachers. We probably have teachers that should be, like teachers do, they come when they don't feel well, but it's really, I just think that's it. Oh man, probably last time I get tested, just pain. So there's not any solution to it, but yeah, that number is not as high as you would think, but it's a constant.
Yeah, right.
And then every time the phone rings, there's a potential for that to go. And we got lucky last week. I think we had one group just coming back, and then the next group's gone. So it's like, and that's the tricky part, I think, for teachers. I think it'd be easier to adapt if they knew this kid's gone. It's like, all right, you're back. Are you supposed to be back? You're back, and now this kid's gone. Where's this kid? And we're at the mercy, too, of parents letting us know, because, if the parent doesn't let us know, I don't know what it's gone. You can't really say, are they, it's been a
Yeah.
frustrating deal.
Yeah.
And by and large, parents have been very good at letting us know that their kid, and we have to take their word for it, too. And we also have to take their word for when they come back. It's like, we don't, some we do, some we don't hear from, but there's some that are quarantined, and I'm like, I have no idea. And so if the parent says, no, the quarantine's over, you go, good, we'll put the kid on.
Well, and I agree
That's a
with,
whole other.
Jason. I think the place that, the kids are safest is here at school, with the precautions of doing all those things. And thinking about, the more, and then we just have the situation, and I think, things maybe just, you guys are doing great, you just have to keep working through it. There's always challenges every single day, and there may be some things to adjust. But once we start going with more remote instruction, it becomes problematic. First of all, our teachers are not trained to really teach in a remote way. It is simple, that's just the way it is. The second thing is you start to, because those kids are remote learners, and I've remote taught for 20 years. A remote learner, if that's what they want, if that's how they want to learn, then they're motivated to learn that way. So they know what's expected of them. Our students are not intended to be remote learners. So there's no motivation. There's motivation to die. So we lose them. So how many do we lose? And again, I'll ask the question again. At what point, not just the question of going remote, but the question is, I think the important question is, how many students are going to have to come back and retreat? If we have to go remote, how many students should come back and retreat grades because they're simply not ready to graduate? Or go to college, or even get a job. So I think these are longer range, deeper issues than just keeping the door open or not. Because I think it's serious. I know a lot of kids, they just quit. And how many, and I think nationally about, when schools go on remote instruction, I think nationally about 40% they just leave them. 40% of kids. I think you said here with between 15 or 20%, somewhere in that area, that gets lose. How many kids do we want to lose, and where do we want to just give up that?
I guess one thing I'd like to add in talking with it, I do want it to be clear, and I think I will be clear, we appreciate what the teachers are doing. Oh, God. We understand the frustrations. I know when we sit here and talk about these things, sometimes it seems like we keep kicking the teachers to the back. And I hope that's not the way they feel.
Yeah,
We are really trying to make it as best situation as we can for everybody. I struggle with, it seems like if we fix this portion, we make this portion work. If we fix this portion, then we make this portion work. And it's just a shuffle game of who we make better and how we do that. I'm not coming up with it. I don't know if we need to kick this back to a smaller committee and look at some of the things that we talked about, like the subs, the longer subs. I don't know that we're getting anywhere tonight.
Yeah, the sub, that's problematic too, as far as I'm concerned. Now, you guys tell me, if it's an elementary sub, I think that crosses disciplines a little easier. But what about high school sub? Because then you're crossing math with English, with physics, with chemistry,
And just the whole logistics of preparing that sub,
Yeah.
preparing for that sub, I sometimes takes more time. It's easier to just be there and do it,
Well, it depends upon though if it's going to be a week or a month or 4 months. It depends.
So what happens if we get our subs trained and ready to go and then that sub test positive?
In all honesty, I don't care if it's a day, it's a lot of work. That's why people would rather come to work than get a sub, because to have one and not lose the effectiveness of your class. It's one thing to go, hey, I'm giving it some word searches, a video, blah, 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 but if you're gonna have quality instruction, which we're saying we need, then I just think that's almost, to me, that's almost more of a burden to it.
I don't think the staff wants to remove themselves from their students anymore. That's not what they want to be teaching their students, their discipline. That's what they want.
Right. Well, my point being this though, was that the time investment is worthwhile if that sub will be in that role for 4 months. If that sub is in that role for a couple of days, it's not worth the time investment on your part. That's what I'm getting to on that.
Really good, I think the only kind of discussion is just the discussion started with it, to recognize there are things that we, need to try to figure out some kind of relief or something,
This is the 8th, and this is Tuesday. Would it make sense to again, we had talked about the week after Christmas as being sort of a remote practice. Would it be worthwhile to consider, and I'm just throwing this out there, as just sort of a pilot, using Wednesday afternoon as a block prep for teachers for the next 2 weeks before Christmas? Just to try it out and see if it works. Does that make any, well, what do we do with students that have to go home early and the parents that have to deal with that. Well, and you have to look out.
So that's what they, we have to do, we have to act.
Yeah. So is that workable? And I'm just, because this way you know if it works, if it doesn't work, you know it's going into next year.
And it doesn't have to be anything immediate, even if it's something that we have something in place maybe by the starting next semester. Or, but we probably going to roll in, after Christmas break, so. I don't know, I don't know if you got time now.
Yeah, but if you started it earlier, you could work those kinks out. There's probably gonna be some kinks, some issues, some things, and maybe you're just gonna say, this just does not work. At least we'll know what we were facing and walking into next, after the first of the year. That's all I'm saying about that. Rather than make a mistake after the first of the year.
And I would rather go off with Dawn, because I would rather see something where we dive in both feet to try it, say, whatever, it's some sort of a pilot and give it an honest go, rather than say, well, let's have a 2 hour early out and try that, and 2 months from now, kind of find out in retrospect that a couple hours that had very good intentions of being spent out is getting delegated towards other things. And I'm guiding you a little bit, this is kind of what I took from you, Brad, is that that time, when it's given there, you want to make sure that it's used in the most productive way possible. And sometimes just, I'd say that, making that obligation, and that's the hardest part. Just making that obligation, that commitment towards whatever that block of time might be. And kind of set up some, I don't know, some sort of analysis, some metrics or something that we, after, we put some sideboard on, we try to establish some goals, really get into it and do it, and then come out of it and say, all right, what do you think? Because I'm all for giving the time that, administration feels that staff needs, but I would rather know that it's somewhat tried and true a little bit, or at least you've had some sort of a pilot that said, yeah, we think that this can work with whatever recommendations come out of that, than just throwing a couple hours in, a couple hours there without really anything to look back on and to try to evaluate.
We're going to start this tomorrow, but we don't have.
We're done with the first phase.
Is our first hurdle still to find out if it's even doable with aggregate hours? Is that our first? Because if there's no relief for that, then it's really not an option, correct?
Well, and that's correct. That is correct. However, I'm almost positive, and you've read through the 19.
And I could probably take through those.
Yeah.
So, and in my opinion, I think if we're looking to solve the problem we're faced with, I think the early out solution is probably the most realistic as far as giving teachers what they need to address the student needs. And I think, if we were to come back after, kind of similar to your plan, Sean, because first of all, we were clear at the beginning of this that this opening is a fluid plan. It is subject to change as our needs change with it. And I think that's important to remember. And if we come back after Christmas, we could give parents some time to find solutions over Christmas break. You've got a while to think about it now. And if we would have, if I'm correct, I think we'd have 2 weeks in the first semester left. And then, starting, I believe, January 16th, we would start the second semester. So that could be possibly kind of our trial run, or at least our way of smoothing out what expectations are, what we're definitely trying to accomplish with this block of time.
Because you feel the semester break is a better break than just a calendar break.
Yeah, I think it's, it's just, how schools are set up, just a little odd periods of time mean something in the school, the quarter break, the semester break, the midterm. And so, you know, that would give us a couple weeks to smooth things out, maybe with that, as well as give parents the heads up that, hey, this is coming, and a chance for us to answer questions about it instead of just making it be such a quick change. And then for the teachers, it's kind of like, hey, we know there's possibly some of they can start planning for it a little bit. Like, this is what that time's going to be used for. You know, you come up with a strategy to how you're going to make it work for you. Instead of just throwing it out there right away.
Yeah. You know, and I think, I think the time for teachers to plan accordingly is probably a better rationale. For parents, given COVID stuff, kids can be out tomorrow and they have the whole world changing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So what happens tomorrow is kind of immaterial for students. But for teachers to being able to plan, I think that's a good point.
I do know as a parent, because I'm the one that makes these calls and goes, hey, you know what? You need to figure something out starting now for the next 14 days. That, yeah, it'd be nice to know, hey, in 2 weeks, you got to figure something out for the next 14 days. So I think you're right. I mean, it's in the world of COVID, everything's immediate. But, man, if we can give them a heads up, I think it'd go a long way toward getting by it.
And also, they're trying to make things better for the quality of what's happening where our schools are and something. We're trying to say it. We want to. We're trying to keep the doors open as long as we can, as effectively as we can, and still providing a good quality, education for our kids. And it just might take a little bit of time, a little bit to make all that.
I think actually the hour thing, I think it's actually workable with the 1900.
Yeah, I think we're still working under that.
Yeah, we are.
I guess my next question is, if we do something like this, do we need to have a board action item? Or is it like that would require a special meeting before implementing it? Or is this something that could just happen?
That's a good question. I'd like to make some phone calls tomorrow to OPI and probably Chris Goss and go, how do we do this? And I agree that it's not something we should just dive into tomorrow or next week. Do some planning, let parents know ahead of time so they can plan for it. Because we got transportation we got to deal with, and talking to the contractors, make sure they can do it or make arrangements to be able to transport kids home early on Wednesdays and those kind of things. So I guess I'd like to get those questions answered tomorrow. I don't know that it needs to be a board action, but I'd rather double check that, and then if so, see if we can do a special meeting next week or we have the week after also to try to put something together to move that.
Well, I want to be sure I clarify around my comments, in that I want to do what's best for the kids. I want to do what's best for the teachers. But what I hear is everybody talking about how stressed and how terrible things are. Let's not sit on our hands. Let's do something about it. And because if it's sitting in our hands, we get stuck. We just stay stressed and whatever else.
So tentatively, we'll look at doing the 6th and the 13th as early out days, assuming we could jump through all of these.
What kind of metrics do you think might be associated with around the requirements of deciding, to Todd's point, if substantive work is being completed? What kinds of things are we looking at? And I think,
I'm not sure what your options are.
how do we know and how do we verify what's coming out of it? Yeah, what are we getting out of it?
If it was an effective.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
What are the metrics around understanding if it's an effective solution?
So they can manage everything in a day, man. Get to every kid.
Well, but this would be qualitative or quantitative in some way.
I mean, survey with teachers would be one way to possibly do that after a given number of time, and then reassessing and getting feedback as to not only, not just a simple question of, hey, is this helping, but how are you using this time? What do you think are the best uses of this time?
And what's not working about it, and what's not
Yes.
working about it as well.
And
Yeah.
what could we do to make that time more productive?
Exactly.
One thing I think we need to avoid, a few things. I mean, I think there's got to be things that know this is not what that time is for. And others, I think, like meetings, those kind of things, as I said, right away, things are usually good, but as time goes by, a lot of times, just in my experience, people tend to forget what the original purpose of something was.
And that's why I was hoping that there was something that was finite, got put out there, and give it to, college try on the, and see what actually happens from that, instead of finding out in April or May that the additional time that we have.
It's a waste of time.
Yeah,
If all we could do-
if all it does is allows them to kind of maybe catch their breath, but it doesn't meet that hopefully purpose.
Yeah, if all we can say in April is that, well, I think it sort of kind of works, but that's not really a good answer.
I would think after a few times of a few days, or a few times, 2 weeks or whatever, that we would have a pretty good feeling, like feedback in the head, okay, this has been great, I'm accomplishing this, I'm able to dedicate more time to this, I think they'll be very honest, they know what time to make their situation better.
And the survey, like that, tailored however to those points, I think it's very good.
Is 2 weeks gonna be enough, or should we look at, or do we need to set a start and an end date to make that determination?
I think, to me, I think we assess as we go. I mean, but I think we set a date for, we're gonna try X number of weeks and then get feedback and reassess there.
How many weeks?
Well, yeah, parents will be looking at wanting to know whether to keep going or not.
Oh, yeah, that's a big
Yeah.
shift. Is it a month, does it take a month?
I think it takes probably a month. I mean, you gotta do something several times. The first time you do it, you're probably gonna go, holy cow, I'm busy, I got nothing done, I did, and then you go, okay, but I think you gotta do something several times before you can really evaluate.
So we should have four Wednesdays in January. Basically, look at reevaluating the window.
And
We're
maybe-
getting some feedback.
Maybe you get feedback at the end of the third week in January, and if things are looking good, well, the fourth week is already set up. If it's not looking so good, it gives you time to transition. A week that still works that way, but it gives you time to transition into whatever may come.
And just to keep in mind with the next to that, we do have the semester, which is going to be a big grade, and
Yeah.
lots of out and tell us and all these other things for the semester. So, it'll be a big ending period for that, it'll be a big ending period, so we have to keep that all in mind too. That will impact the day to that, there's going to be a lot to do during that last week. So that'll be a busy time.
If we go forward and tell parents to plan for 4 weeks.
And perhaps again, just get that feedback maybe at the end of the third. And again, I just want to restate, if you like it, if it works, continue it. If it doesn't seem to work, the parent, then parents will still have a week that's all within that pattern. And then we can figure out whatever needs to be beyond that point. To me, that sounds reasonable, rational, and a good plan.
Well, and for those kids who are on the Celis, knowing that, I would hope at least, the intention, with this prep time off is so that those students that maybe feel like they were not tended to quite as well either by the program or that their needs of the future. That is a component of this. You want that additional prep time really not just for on-campus students or the remote learners that totally can also. And that would be, that would be something that I would want to, certainly stress for those folks as well. And know as much as for those who are here.
I think what we're going to find is that, maybe dedicate to that for things to do. That is going to be their time to really focus on the family. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Moving on. Anything else under committee report?
No, I guess one thing I'd mention for committee reports is basically the special work board meeting that we had. Just let folks know that had a work meeting with the entire board to really visit about the superintendent's job description and moving forward and posting that position. I appreciate all the hard work everybody's done on that. A lot of emails going back and forth. John, thanks so much for working on the application materials and all the feedback. But very good meeting, very productive, and I think we've made leaps and bounds just since that meeting. So appreciate it.
The only other thing that I might add to that, Mr. Chairman, is just kind of note maybe for the minutes that the board resolved, the committee, the working committee kind of resolved that while we had some offers to help the district with, the candidate search and preparing meetings and working through all that scheduling document preparation, the board, decided, we can do it ourselves. And so, I mean, it's not just, a cost savings to the district for doing it, but we've gone through this before where, I'm thankful that, we've got Sean and Kevin that were here beforehand, and, so they know how labor intensive that is, but, after talking on colors, that was the consensus that, we can move forward. We can do that ourselves, and so I think the job description and the work that went into that is directly reflects that.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda items.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the consent action items as presented.
Second. Moved and seconded to approve the consent action items as presented. Discussion? Discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes. Action item, essential worker payment. I guess I'm gonna let Todd take the lead on it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess by way of background, maybe I'll provide the board and our watchers and administration for minutes, I guess, a little bit of backstory. Must be maybe a month ago, a little bit more, I approached Mr. Wilkerson on behalf of the board and Ms. Watson to inquire about the status of our COVID-19 money that we had allocated to us by the state. Most of that had been gone towards hard costs, PPE, supplies, things like that. Under the governor's plan, it also allowed for funds to be used for hiring additional staff. I asked the question whether, given our circumstances and all of our different workers in the district, both our certified, our classified staff, paras, custodians, everybody, whether those funds could be used to pay a special duty or hazard pay, and have that meet within the definition of what's acceptable under the CARES Act. We had, if you memory serves me correct, about $110,000, $111,000 when the query was made. normally we don't like to take a real bleeding edge approach to something, but I felt that was something we could look at, and through my interpretation and through Mr. Chairman here and Eric's estimation as well as Ms. Watson, we determined that the funds could be paid to district staff as hazard pay. So, given that the school year's kind of provided some unique challenges for us, duties were developed by this board and district administration as a part of our reopening plan, and there are extra duties that have arisen because of that. The board would like to, acknowledge that employees at every level have actually stepped up to date with those issues, and our classified and our certified union as well. We ratified a memorandum of agreement which the district and our unions are working through right now, as long as we are in this state of emergency. And because we have these conditions that are being met, and we've kind of checked off some of the criteria that the district needed to fulfill in case that we were ever audited for our code expenditures. We have determined that there are 87 full-time employees or employees that are working more than 20 hours a week. There are 7 employees that are working less than 20 hours a week that would be eligible for a special duty hazard type payment. So, Mr. Chairman, what I would like to do is we have an essential worker payment document that was in our board packet, with color online. Mr. Wilkerson and I made some changes to that document today in light of some new information and some new recommendations from the Montana School Board Association. It appears that the School Board Association and MTPC Consortium forwarded correspondence and questions to Governor Bullock, and Governor Bullock's policy advisors provided some helpful and some more detailed information and some recommendations which kind of solidified what it was that we intended on doing. So that's why this document looks a little bit different, because most of those recommendations start coming officially from the School Board Association as of about 11 o'clock this morning. So due to this, as the document says, that assuming what I would do is I would go ahead and make a motion based on the following criteria that, the district would acknowledge essentially that each employee is an essential worker and is entitled to a hazard duty payment. And that a payment in the amount of $500 would be made to an eligible employee that regularly works more than 20 hours per week and performs the extra hazard duties that are actually described in the document for their job classification. That is a requirement of the CARES Act, that extra duties be spelled out, and there are those duties that are either on an ongoing basis or could be project-based. $500 payment would be made to those folks working more than 20 hours a week, and $250 as a one-time payment would be made for an employee who regularly works 20 hours or less and performs those extra hazard duties described in that document. The pay calculations are based on the number of hours required in the collective bargaining agreement. The $500 and the $250 payments are a one-time payment only. There would be, we would actually direct the superintendent and the district clerk to do a special payroll event where we would issue warrants that would be stated that the monies are stated in gross amounts or pre-tax amounts. They would be subject to all withholding, such as Social Security, Medicaid, TRS, and work comp. And the employee is eligible for this payment must be employed on the date the payment will be approved, which if we successful through that would be tonight, and the checks would be distributed on before this Friday, December 11th. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I guess I would ask if there are any questions by any of the board or the administration at this time, and if none, I will move forward with the formal motion.
Did you have anything to add to that, Eric?
No, I don't believe so. Again, we spelled it out pretty clearly today and really classified. I truly appreciate what everybody's done, and hopefully this is, this is something that we can use to, I want to put it correctly. People have earned this, in my opinion, and they've done an excellent job, and we truly appreciate it. But no, I fully agree with this and think it's a great idea.
And Mr. Chair, maybe just that in light of that as well, that yes, while it's unfortunate that things like financial arrangements and payments might be easier to swing than adjusting time and whatnot, but the level of the decision and the impacts, if this is a board, authorized payment, and it really doesn't disrupt the operation of the district, because these are monies that, we've seen as a part of the district's allotment for COVID. These are funds that we will likely and hopefully never see again. And because the administration of the district has done it good, and I think prudent stewardship of the spending of money is what's actually put us in this position that we were able to explore these options. And yes, if I could, write a check out for 10 times this amount to everybody, I would certainly love to be able to do it. And I hope that, the checks and the thought behind it are accepted, and know that, you thank you, and hopefully you can put this all behind us.
A motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that the board approve the essential worker hazard duty payment on December 8, 2020, and then we direct the superintendent and district clerk to process a supplemental check that would be distributed to our district employees on before Friday, December 11, 2020.
I'll second.
Want to get it all in there. I'm going to paraphrase. It's been moved and seconded to approve the essential worker hazard duty payment. I hope Pam got all that. She was cutting me something about it. But I think I got it. So, any further discussion? I would just like to add a thanks to Todd for his efforts pursuing this, and same with Eric and Pam. I know they both put in some extra work trying to verify and follow up that all this was able and capable. And again, thank you to all the teachers and staff, everybody that had to deal with this. We appreciate everything you've done. And appreciate Todd for pursuing this and bringing it to fruition. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes. Accept the duties increase proposal from MTSBA.
All right, Montana School Board Association did send out, I believe it's in our packet here somewhere, kind of information on the 22 news revenue estimate. I guess when it comes to nuts and bolts, Pam kind of did some calculating. I think we're probably pretty close on this. It's basically the last billing cycle, we paid $5,448. And after calculating that increase, it looks like we'd probably be paying approximately $5,917. So I guess my recommendation is to approve the proposed increase. What they did do is they basically what you're approving tonight is the ability for them to do that increase. We have to get on an email and send them information that our board did approve that. I think they're doing that prior to actually doing any increases.
Well, I have a question, and I think it's probably worth approval, and I think the answer is probably to this question will be yes, but let me ask it anyway. Are we getting our money's worth?
Whose opinion do you want? There's a lot of times, quite honestly, that when we have a legal issue and we really need to talk to somebody and walk us through it, and I'll say him by name, Chris Goss has been absolutely amazing. He's a person that I've trusted with his legal opinions, and you know, there are things we couldn't just make up without their help. I guess not everything's absolutely wonderful in that realm, but like I said, for those really important times where we need some support, it's been.
Yeah, I would reiterate, you know, I think it's still every time you had to ask somebody a legal question, you had to call a lawyer that, you know, wasn't there, the fees would probably be above and beyond that. Yeah, it is a lot of money, and you question whether you get the money. I know I've spoken with them, even the emails, you know, that we receive, you know, seems like hourly, some days, but, you know, there's a lot of good information that I think that, you know, it makes it worthwhile.
Well, they do provide a lot of free training, and it's paid training as well, but a lot of free training, so I just wanted to, I think it's important to ask that question. It's not to change, and as long as we feel comfortable with that, I'm good.
They also, you know, you've got legislative session coming up, and so, you know, they're kind of rallying the troops and what the people they've got, you know, develop their legislative agendas and things like that. So, you know, associations, once you get to a certain size, almost become a group of necessity, because the things that they're able to advance kind of for the overall good. So, you know, it's a little bit more than, you know, it's roughly a 10% increase in the amount of dues, but, you know, all things considered, I think it's worth it. So.
Okay, well, as such, I move to approve the proposed increase in MTSBA dues as presented.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the proposed increase in MTSBA dues as presented. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the motion passes. Superintendent Johnson, Christian.
All right, I believe everybody should have a copy of the latest with all the edits and everything. I think Pam made some copies for everybody there. A lot of work went into this, and I think it's a really, really good job description. But again, the board was kind of the big lead on that, so I'd recommend you approve it as presented.
Well, the only thing I would add there is that the link, and Joe and I were working on this a little bit earlier, There will be a link on the last page of the job description where it says submitting your application. Probably right down near where you'll find the application on the district website. But we're going to get some links out there and we'll just append or add those links and a little verbiage to the description and just get that done. We're almost there, just not quite. So that'll be added as well. So it'll be probably tomorrow morning and Max will finish that up, I guess. So that's the only addition on my part.
I think that's, and I appreciate you not taking the lead on the application and all this. And, I think it's good that, it reflects, it's good to direct people to our website. It's good to direct people in those digital means. We actually have got a website and content that is worthy of exploration and it's something that, it's worth showing off. And so I'm glad that you've got that in there. So, Mr. Chairman, I guess that being said, that I would move that we approve the superintendent's job description as presented, and allowing for, procedural, leveling type things to be added to the final act.
Second. Been moved and seconded to approve the superintendent's job description as presented with the addition of, any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes.
I was just going to add something about, because Todd mentioned the application. The application all is pretty solid, it's pretty set. I think everyone's seems to be in agreement on supplemental questions 2 and 3. Kevin and I had a conversation this morning around adding a first question that was kind of more geared towards strategic planning and community involvement. And so we developed a question, question number 1, for that, a new question around that topic to replace question number 1, which is a very good on-site interview kind of question. So I've emailed all of you guys that proposed question and asked for feedback around that. So we can go ahead and hash that out on the application itself, either now or via email tomorrow or something like that. It's either fine. Sometimes that kind of hashing out and takes hours. Yeah. Well, I was inspired. I was inspired, and I had to finish the question because it was there, So.
And the application doesn't require any kind of vote of approval from the.
Basically, we'll submit these as soon as we have these final few things.
Yeah.
We set our dates that they require back to, we'll get them all there.
Right. And Joe's put a couple of placeholder files out there on some links and one's the application, one's the job description, so we're pretty set there. We get that last question sorted out, and we'll be good to go. Sounds good.
Okay, moving on to personnel. We don't show any resignations, is that correct?
We have no resignations at this time.
Good. Employment.
Okay, so under substitute, we have an application from Andrea Rice to be a substitute. I would like to also add Josh Leonard and Sarah Tiffany.
Justin Lundy.
Yep, I interchanged those, didn't I?
Yeah. The other one's the game warden.
Yeah, that's the one we want.
That's the one we want.
It is the game warden.
Oh, it is Josh.
Josh, the game warden coach.
Yeah,
But he
I was
was
calling
approved.
Justin before. It is Josh. So it is the game warden, and we
He's
have
already been
actually, I
approved.
think, used him in the past, and then he's off the list, so we just need to put him back on the list. But we do need background stuff on both Mr. Leonard and Miss Tiffany.
Okay, so it should say Josh.
It should say Josh.
Okay.
Sarah Tiffany?
Okay, so it should be Andrea Wright, Sarah Tiffany, and Josh Leonard.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the applications of Andrea Wright, Sarah Tiffany, and Josh Leonard as substitutes. Mr. Wilson just asked, are any of them pending background check?
Mr. Leonard and Miss Tiffany, and it may be also Mrs. Rice. I can't remember if Pam got that one back or not.
I have not yet.
Okay.
I'm not yet, so they would all three be pending background check.
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, we'll amend the motion for Andrea Wright, Sarah Tiffany, and Josh Leonard pending as substitutes and background check.
Okay. Been moved and seconded to approve Andrea Wright, Sarah Tiffany, and Josh Leonard pending background check as substitutes for the 2020-2021 school year. Any further discussion? Discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes. Paraprofessional.
All right, so Suzanne Neal was hired as a paraprofessional using the Governor's CARES Act funds, which go through December 30th, I should say, not 31st. I would like to offer Suzanne employment through the remainder of this school year. And basically, we will try to write an amendment to our ESSER fund. We are hoping for more federal funds coming through the governor, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen anytime soon. So we're kind of waiting on that. I would also like to add Allison Ferreira as a paraprofessional. Some of you may recall that name, that we did hire her last year, but after a short amount of time, she actually decided to help with her husband's business. She has sent us a letter of interest at the open paraprofessional position that we do have. We don't have a lot of applicants, so I think we should probably give this a try because we are short at this point. So I would ask that we hire Suzanne Neal as a paraprofessional, continue her employment, and then also hire Allison Ferreira as a paraprofessional.
Oh,
Did I confuse everybody?
I don't move. I do. If you want me to spell it out, I'll spell it out. I move to approve the continuation of the hire of Suzanne Neal. Would that be the correct verbiage?
Yes, correct.
Okay, the continuation of the hire of Suzanne Neal throughout the remainder of the current academic year. And in addition, I move to approve the hire of Allison Ferreira as a paraprofessional for the rest of this coming year. Would that be correct?
Yes,
Is that a correct statement?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, second.
I tried to make it easy. I did. I'll sum it up. It's been moved and seconded to approve the hire of Suzanne Neal for the remainder of the year and the addition of Allison Ferreira also as a paraprofessional for the remainder of the year. Is there any further discussion? Discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes. KitchenAid.
All right, Lori Check and Danielle Douglas were hired as KitchenAids until December 30th of 2020. I would like to offer them their contracts through the remainder of the school year also. So, Lori will be paid using the ESSER funds, and Danielle actually is I think paid out of the general fund. So we'd just like to, I just checked her contract and it said through December 30th, but we need to continue that employment also.
Okay, I move to approve the
But I
continuation.
would just,
Go ahead.
oops. Yeah, I would just approve the hire of Lori Check and Daniel Douglas for the remainder of the current school year.
Okay, and they're currently hired. Okay,
Yes, they are.
okay, okay, so technically it'd be something different, but that's fine. I move to approve the hire of Lori Check and Danielle Douglas for the remainder of the school year.
I'll second.
Yeah, that's the correct.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded to approve the continuation of hire for Lori Check and Danielle Douglas for the remainder of the school year. Any further discussion? Discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes.
Jason, I know you're talking about filling all of them, but I do have the one with Title I parent involvement. I do have, we are being audited under Title I. And so if there's a chance that you can look at that for the first reading of these.
Yeah, that's a good recommendation, if we possibly could. It's a pretty simple one, but we kind of need it for our Title I audit.
So maybe one motion to table those approvals to that. Just possible consideration, postpone consideration. So we will jump over, look at policy 4218, Title I parent involvement. Mr. Rosen.
All right, and I may defer this to Ms. Hartman, but basically the Office of Public Instruction did basically make some recommendations on changing our current policy. So as you see, there are strikeouts, and the highlighted is to substitute. So basically, we don't talk about letters of permission to test the students. We basically do a parents and students school compact, and a compact would be similar to that. It's basically an agreement to, and that's sent home with students at the beginning of the year. That compact has to be signed in order to do under the old way of doing things, it had to be signed for us to work with them. But since we are school-wide, it is a little different now. Letters, it says student selection for the title that has been taken out. That's also having to do with the school-wide that we do right now. So it's basically sent to parents, informing them that the child is below benchmark and will be receiving additional services such as intervention. And I don't know if Christina has anything to add to those.
This was written under a targeted assistance school and not another school audit. So you don't have, this process is not important now. We don't do all the permissions and letters and stuff. Everyone receives services.
Oh, and that's why the first line in number 1 says letters for permission to test students for student selection.
Correct.
So it's no longer a selection issue.
No,
Oh.
no selection.
Okay. I see, yeah. Okay. I move to approve the changes to policy 4218, Title I parent involvement for first reading.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the changes to policy 4218, Title I parent involvement for first reading. Any further discussion?
Just a question. This question actually is around, and this is all great. It's all fine. So the OPI is making the change to Title I and the second reading will be in January. Is that? And my only question is around: is that soon enough for the process?
Yes, as long as there's a first reading, okay.
Oh, okay.
If we can, we have in our policy, we can suspend the rule
Right.
to adopt on first reading.
No,
We'll be okay with the, okay, I'll get it, that's it.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes. Okay, principal's report. Ms. Ross.
So, boy, almost everything on here was kind of addressed already tonight through the reopening thing. One thing I will hit on is holiday concert status, and the decision that's been made this year to not have concerts. We explored some options to do them virtually. We are in a situation where the teacher is also teaching virtually, and it just it doesn't work. We explored some different things, but we've canceled those for the year. We will still have groups perform in some creative ways, like the group usually goes to the bank and does that. They're going to go outside and record it and do that. So that's really the only news that wasn't addressed during the reopening. The Chromebook situation was just one. I really can't even remember what. That seems like a month ago. There's been a lot of water under the bridge since then. I think our biggest, pardon me?
Was it the back order issue? Because I know that.
Yeah, that's
still
what we were
backward.
just, we're kind of at a tough spot with Chromebooks. We are almost out of ones for new students, and I think we're good now. There's some help coming. These guys have done a good job of making them available when they do go bad. Ones that are non-functional, they've been able to use parts for. They've been pretty creative in how they've done it. So we do have enough to continue that one-to-one right now, but boy, we don't have a lot of room to spare for sure.
Yeah, we've just been kind of making it work however we have to, and our options are getting thin. But the saving grace is our time's coming close to when these other new ones should be in. So hopefully everything will time out just right. We won't have any real hiccups as more new kids come in.
All right, so yeah, kind of the same book, a lot of this is already covered, which I figured we probably would. We did just end the quarter and got monthly reports out today. Next day, kids are doing well, kids are struggling, nothing out of normal for the in-person students. It seems to be good. Parents obviously have her job with this on for a variety of reasons. And the middle school as well. We already covered the SELLAS, the students' progress in general. Our fellow students are also all over the place. I know the teachers are working hard to stay in contact. We have some that have just disappeared off the map like they did in the spring. We have some that are actually becoming better on a SELLAS than they do when they're after school. And then we have everybody in the middle that's just doing well and passing their classes and seems to be doing okay. So just a wide variety of everything for our SELLAS students. We already kind of covered our COVID challenges here, different things to do. We're after these updates. So the winter sports group started their practices yesterday. Basketball practice is up and running and wrestling is up and running. We did not have enough numbers this year, so we will not have winter cheerleaders. Speech and drama actually had their first virtual meet. Everything for them is all virtual. They did that last Saturday, and the reports were actually pretty good. It went quite well. I think they're going to end up getting their feedback and their placements and how they did kind of retroactive. They're going to get them right away just because of the way the judging has to be done remote and on a virtual status. So they don't quite know sometimes exactly how they did yet. So get their reports. But I heard technology was great still. So thumbs up for you because the technology work here works fine as far as the remote news goes.
Now, was that the, who posted that? Belfry. Belfry did?
Yeah. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, judge.
Cool.
Yeah.
They
They
were,
were supposed to judge too.
there were some delays and things like that. But, yeah, on the whole, the software is real interesting. Because it's formatted like a Zoom or Google Meet, but it has things specifically geared for speech and debate. It's got timers and things like that that are built into the interface.
Where there's a will, there's a way, man.
Yeah, definitely. Now, COVID has its downside, but COVID also presents opportunity. And
It's a national platform too.
Yeah.
But they're using everywhere.
Yeah. A little place like Belfry, though, that's by Bridger, one by Bridger, right?
Yeah.
The back.
Well, but
Yeah, okay.
So they're starting to get ready. We have a strong team like we've had in the past several years. Our girls basketball numbers are up. Our boys basketball numbers are down. It kind of reflects football season, having just a number of boys engaging in activities. Wrestling numbers are down quite a bit. I think we're seeing a downturn in some of our, because we do have our fellowship and remote owners. A lot of those were wrestlers and then supposed to not do the extracurriculars. So we are working, Mr. Rao and I are gonna hit the gyms tomorrow and try to figure out what spectators are going to look like for basketball, because oh man, it's gonna be something else. So we're gonna just do a careful walkthrough and see how we can time our spaces effectively and what our numbers are gonna look like to allow people to come in. It's gonna be tighter with double teams and boys and girls and all of it. So we're gonna try to get people in as much as we can and preserve as much of our game atmosphere as we can. So, and also wrestling. The big thing for wrestling is that they moved to duels, so there's no more tournaments. They can't do tournaments anymore. So we are hosting actually 7 home events for wrestling, which is way higher. We usually have maybe 2 or 3, I think. So we're going to host a lot more home events for wrestling, opposite of our basketball home and away. So every school.
We haven't, back to basketball, we haven't found a girls' team club, so we're just operating under 2 coaches.
We did interview today, and so we will, Mr. Wilkerson, were there any other applicants as of today?
I haven't seen any applicants at all, so I'm assuming whatever applicants we received were given to you guys, so.
Oh, it doesn't say you haven't been in, sorry, we had 1 application. So
Oh,
I didn't know if
okay.
you had any other emails to you or letters of interest or anything else.
Not that I'm aware of unless Pam got some, but no, I was in Sunday and there was nothing in my mailbox, so.
Okay, perfect. So, I believe, I was in an IDC, but I know Mr. Rao and, Coach Darlington did interview a candidate today. So right at the end of the school. So you'll have news on that up and coming. So hopefully we'll have 3 in place, but that went well.
Our schedule for basketball, are we limiting it, is it just within district? We're only playing district teams, home and away, and that's what the
Right.
schedule is?
Yeah, so basically, any of our early season stuff, we actually are able to move. What we did in our 7D is we, obviously all the December games were on that we had. So we took all of those out. We basically stayed with our same regular schedule starting in January. And then we just plugged in anything we lost. We are taking up, Livingston in our on-conference games. We're not going to make any of those. So we did, plug in Big Timber and Shogo into the weeks between districts and divisionals. So we basically we don't have a break between district tournament and divisional now. We stuck the schedule together to accommodate those athletes. And we scheduled. So actually, really didn't lose much basketball. All things considered, we ended up with a pretty small score of games for our basketball. And then tournament, yeah, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I think the basketball tournaments are going to look much like we had to do with volleyball for the 5 years. And that's how we're going to do it. The 5-team host is kind of a loser out of the merge in the first round. It'll be very similar to that. And then there's a lot of discussion around the business. We've had several meetings that all work in progress. So obviously, we've had a phone host sites and all that kind of stuff. So everything's different, but we're rolling. We're rolling. Numbers are the big thing, just because we have a lot of people in the same place at one time. So we're going to have to mitigate that. We still plan on doing something with our high school. We have a full day, our last day school before Christmas break instead of our normal noon release, so we're in school all day. So I mean, I've visited with my principal advisor, whether you have any plan on that, but it kind of sounds like the staff was really asking to talk to Mr. Ross too, because we just talked about this today, so I know this was that. But, we're looking at maybe doing like a 12 o'clock schedule in the morning of that day, so that the teachers can have one more contact with their students before they go out on, Christmas break, make sure they're all up with what they need for school and their academics, especially with our basketball starting in January. And then maybe, run into some fun activities in the afternoon, and just set aside the second half of the day for, some of the usual shenanigans like pickleball and different activities like that, so they can, have some downtime and have some time before they go on with it. So that's kind of what we're looking at. And other than that, we really don't have any other activities. It's great coming up the 23rd through the 1st.
We are doing a great fall favors break countdown for staff right now. We have some great community members donate prizes to us, and so we started that off for a couple of days now. They've had treats from Pepsi, and I'm guessing today was got jeans pasty, so they're all excited to get for extra jeans. Mr. Wilkerson was kind enough to let them have an extra jean day in there, so. So we have lots of fun events there, so they for our staff too, just trying to get them through the end of it.
Now, with some of the teachers in elementary put together a dress up day schedule, so we're using that in conjunction. So they're just kind of doing a school-wide 12 days before winter break for dress up days and fun for the staff and the kids alike. So, yep. Trying to keep morale up. Trying to keep morale up.
Hence the flag. Why is that part of the dress up there?
What's that?
It hence the flag.
Oh, yeah.
The flag. Yes.
Today's Mad Flag Day. Everybody's in flag. So,
Brought those up work today, so.
I know that is just memorable.
Probably wouldn't be wearing it.
That's been fun. We've been having a lot of success and fun activities planned for the next couple of weeks. So we'll be good.
So a little expansion to that. I mean, we didn't talk a lot about the EE class. Overall mental health, well-being of the whole situation. Do you think our kids are in a pretty good spot? Do you think?
I feel, what I hear from, the masks are wearing on them a little bit, but they also, I think they respect and realize that they truly are probably helping our situation a lot. We're not getting, the high numbers that I think we would because we weren't doing that. They've been very compliant. They're following the rules. I don't feel discipline's not really an issue because they're just doing what they're supposed to be doing. I mean, the normal, it's still normal, but overall, I feel like there's, you can still see the stress on the kids too. Just the whole situation feels a little stressful. But other than that, the day to day, they go to their classes, they seem to be performing fairly well. They seem happy in the holidays, they have their friends, they're still doing their thing. So I think overall, they're still in a pretty good mental place.
They still have that outlet through activities and being able to hang out with their friends wherever, whenever.
Yeah, there is some of it. You just get some of those things, they're like, why, we're not doing the normal thing anymore.
From my own family's perspective, did the kids realize that even if you're not the one that's been afflicted with the virus, you're oftentimes impacted more than the person that has had it, because you have to wait until their time is done before your time starts and things like that. And so, some of that shared response, kind of the communal responsibility of it all, really hits home on the kids.
Okay. And I think it will help them to have their activities starting again. I think that's a key, it's an outlet, like you said, it's a release, it's an outlet, they get to do something that feels totally more normal, even if it's under different, family or circumstances, they're still getting to do it, and they're so thankful. I know because we're so thankful to have their inner season and be able to have an entire season, and they're excited about that. So they're keeping it all in stride quite well, I think.
I think that's what they can do with the elementary. They don't have the activities, but our teachers are really invested to say, okay, we can't do this the way we used to do, but how can we still do it? And they're really trying to stay that way, to still have to make them.
Quick question. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just gonna say that the thing you gotta remember is I think I say it every year, is once December 1st hits, it's a whole different animal. You see, I can tell you in the week since December started, I've had things that I deal with once a year. We've had more child protection issues in 1 week than we've had the entire rest of the year. Family and custody type issues, things that just are inherent with the holidays around the school and families, and it's a really, I think you see stresses in families that manifest themselves at school that you don't see any other time of year. And, this year it's probably compounded a little bit because of some of the restrictions put on people, but.
I was just gonna ask, so I think, and I think I've got this right, the new CDC guidelines are quarantine for 10 days.
If you don't, yes, if you don't test positive and you're not symptomatic, they're really focusing on the symptomatic.
Yeah,
part.
right.
So if you're not symptomatic at all and you haven't had a positive test, then they're saying that physical staff can return at that 10-day point. Positive test is over 10 days, still at the 10 days.
Sure.
And then there's a caveat to 7 days, and I'm not quite sure I understand
That's
it
so
quite.
convoluted.
Okay, thank you. Because I'm like, I don't get what
It
this
involves
means.
like, seems to me like double testing. You have one test and then you have another test on the 5th day. And it was,
It's impossible to return after 7 until
Right.
our state or governor or somebody makes rapid testing possible, because you have to have a test on the 7th day. And then if you're negative, you can't, I can tell you right now, you can't get a test and get same-day results here. It's hard enough to get
simple
tested.
logistics.
The 10-day does help a lot, but like I said today, I spent the entire afternoon and I did calling, 15 kids that we have on quarantine until the 15th, because now they can come back like the 11th, which is great, we get them back in the school.
So that'll have a positive impact, that shorter.
Yep.
Okay.
Definitely. Definitely.
Good, that may alleviate some of the issues that we discussed, maybe?
Something like that.
Well, not alleviate, but alleviate's the wrong word, but
I know.
some kind of mitigation, minimizing, a little less bad.
That's the hardest part of it, is the length of time. And that's why
Yeah.
people won't be honest about, and the problem's not gonna get solved because of the length of time if you're a close contact. It's just crazy. I mean, I'm not saying it's not justified, but that's why, people go to great lengths to not, oh no, I wasn't.
Especially if you're asymptomatic.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a tough situation. Another thing I think too is, I know there's a big push for coming in. I don't want to go into an area that we can't go, but there's going to be a big push in January for everything to be really safely opened and everything else. And I'm telling you, the school, to me, it's absolutely ridiculous that a teacher cannot walk down there and get a test any day they want. It's just crazy that it's difficult.
Should almost be a standing order.
You should be able to go down there, and they've got to do something to where teachers have access to, teachers and healthcare workers have to have access, in my opinion, to the rapid test. Because it's crazy.
So is a rapid test the one that you can do at home?
No, they say they give them, and we can do them for college football players and pro athletes and people that really matter. Not a lot.
Yeah.
Teachers, you can't, or education people, or, I don't know where the healthcare workers.
MTSBA has been communicating that they have worked out some sort of a partnership with National Health and Human Services. The state could be allocated like 850,000 rapid tests. And so they were floating the communication out about, they're trying to gauge interest on a district by district level. And that was probably a week and a half ago. And a couple trustees happened to work in the healthcare field and, raised issues about, are the people who are dispensing the tests, what are they doing with the information? Are they qualified to do it? Supposedly the manufacturer of the test says there was some basic training. It's like less than an hour's worth of training. An individual would be able to administer the test, would be able to make sure the test wasn't spoliated somehow, wasn't ruined or corrupted somehow. you know, they can put that in there and then, set it off. So it looks